In the quiet suburb of Mapleton, where Victorian homes stood like sentinels along tree-lined streets, Officer Nora Harlow's canine partner Archer tensed beside her. His ears pricked forward, body suddenly rigid with alertness. Something in the static-filled radio transmission had triggered his instincts, a sixth sense that had saved both their lives twice before. Nora noticed the Belgian Malinois' sudden change in demeanor, even before she fully processed the dispatch call herself. His amber eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. Unit 27, we've got a 10-921 at 1426 Willow Lane. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio. Neighbor reports unusual noises coming from the residence. Homeowner Margaret Sinclair, female, 58, no priors. Nora glanced at Archer, whose body remained tense and ready. She reached for the radio. Copy that, dispatch. Unit 27 responding, ETA 5 minutes. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow across Mapleton's residential streets as Nora's patrol car turned onto Willow Lane. Unlike the rougher neighborhoods they typically patrolled in the Eastern District, this area boasted immaculate lawns and American flags hanging proudly from porch columns. A middle-aged man in pressed khakis and a blue polo shirt waited at the curb, checking his watch nervously. He approached as Nora parked. "Officer, thank you for coming," he said, keeping his voice low as if sharing a secret. "Margaret's been my neighbor for nearly 20 years. Wonderful woman, teaches 3rd grade at Oak Ridge Elementary. But something's not right. There have been strange noises coming from her basement for 3 days straight." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "Not construction sounds. More like..." He hesitated, glancing toward the house. "Look, I know how this sounds, but it's like someone's down there." Nora nodded, maintaining a professional expression. "I understand your concern, sir. I'll check it out." As they approached the modest 2-story colonial with its freshly painted shutters and well-tended flower beds, Archer's demeanor changed dramatically. His body stiffened, hackles rising along his spine. Nora had worked with the Malinois for 4 years, and she recognized his signals. Archer wasn't merely alert. He was detecting something that genuinely alarmed him. Margaret Sinclair answered on the 3rd knock. She was a petite woman with silver-streaked auburn hair pulled into a neat bun, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. Her smile seemed practiced, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the doorframe. "Officer, this is unexpected," she said, her voice pleasant but strained. "Is everything all right?" "Ma'am, I'm Officer Harlow with Mapleton PD. We received a call about some unusual noises coming from your property. Do you mind if I come in to make sure everything's okay?" Margaret's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Oh, that must be the plumbing. I've had some issues with the pipes in the basement. Nothing to worry about, truly." Nora noted the woman's perfectly pressed cardigan and slacks, not the attire of someone dealing with plumbing problems. As Margaret stepped aside to let them enter, Archer started pulling hard on his leash, nose pointed toward the rear of the house. "Well-trained dog you have there," Margaret commented, her voice pitched slightly higher than before. "Though I'm afraid I'm not much of an animal person myself." The living room was immaculate. Decorative plates adorned the walls, family photos were arranged on the mantel, and children's essays were pinned to a corkboard with "My Amazing Teacher" written in colorful lettering. A teacher's home through and through. But Archer wouldn't calm down. He kept pulling toward a door at the end of the hallway, letting out a low warning growl Nora had only heard during their most dangerous operations. "Is that the basement door?" Nora asked, struggling to maintain control of the straining dog. Margaret stepped between them in the hallway, her body language shifting subtly. "Yes, but as I said, it's just plumbing issues. My handyman's coming tomorrow. There's really no need." Archer barked sharply once, twice, 3 times, his signal that he detected something critical. "Ma'am, my K9 is specially trained to detect human distress," Nora said, her hand instinctively moving closer to her weapon. "I need to check your basement." Margaret's transformation was instant. The grandmotherly warmth vanished, replaced by cold calculation. "Do you have a warrant, Officer Harlow?" she asked, crossing her arms. Nora maintained steady eye contact. "No, ma'am, but if you refuse a welfare check when my trained K9 is showing clear alert signals, I'll have probable cause to obtain one immediately. Then I suggest you do exactly that, Margaret replied, her voice icy. Until then, I believe our conversation is over. As Nora reluctantly retreated to her vehicle, Archer fought her every step of the way, barking frantically at the house. She'd never seen him this agitated without a clear threat present. In the car, she immediately radioed her supervisor. Lieutenant Reynolds, this is Harlow. I need to discuss obtaining a warrant for 14-6 Willow Lane. Harlow, are you certain about this? Lieutenant Reynolds' voice crackled over the radio after she explained the situation. Margaret Sinclair has been Teacher of the Year 3 times, church choir director, volunteers with disadvantaged kids. You're talking about obtaining a warrant based on your dog's behavior? With all due respect, sir, Archer has never been wrong, Nora insisted. There's something off about that house. The basement door has 3 new deadbolts. I could smell bleach, a lot of it, and there were food trays hidden under other trash in her kitchen garbage. The line went silent for a moment. Hold your position. I'm sending Officer Chen to run a background check on Sinclair. Don't approach the house again until we know more. 30 minutes later, Nora's phone buzzed with a text from Officer Chen. Check your email now. The attachment contained 3 missing persons reports, all children between ages 7 and 9, all from Margaret's school, all filed within the past month. The reports had been classified as low-priority runaways because each child had a history of unstable home life. One detail caught Nora's eye. All 3 children had been in Margaret's classroom for a special after-school reading program. Nora's blood ran cold. As she looked up at the house, she could see Margaret through the front window, pacing while talking frantically on the phone. Archer hadn't stopped his low, continuous growl since they'd returned to the car. I hear you, boy, Nora whispered, reaching for her radio again. And we're not leaving until we find out what's in that basement. Her phone rang. Lieutenant Reynolds. Harlow, judge just approved the warrant. Backup is on the way. Do not approach until they arrive. As darkness fell over Willow Lane, Nora watched Margaret moving through the house, closing blinds, checking locks. Archer's growls deepened as he stared unblinking at the Colonial's darkened windows. In the distance, Nora heard sirens approaching. Whatever nightmare lurked behind Margaret Sinclair's perfect teacher facade, it wouldn't stay hidden much longer. Nora placed her hand on Archer's head, feeling his muscles trembling with tension. We're going to find them, she promised her partner, who hadn't taken his eyes off the house. Whatever she's hiding down there, we're going to bring it into the light. 3 police cruisers converged on Willow Lane, lights pulsing silently. Nora had requested no sirens. Tactical surprise was essential. Lieutenant Reynolds and 4 officers approached the house in formation, tactical vests secured. Harlow, you and Archer take point once we're in, Reynolds radioed. If there are children in there, they'll respond better to the dog. Nora checked Archer's tactical vest, adjusting the straps. The Malinois' gaze never left the house, his urgency vibrating through the leash. Officer Rivera approached, her expression grim. Thermal imaging picked up multiple heat signatures in the basement, small ones. We're going in, Reynolds confirmed. The breach happened in seconds. The front door splintered under the battering ram. Mapleton Police Department, search warrant! Reynolds' voice boomed through the house. Margaret appeared at the top of the stairs in a bathrobe, her face a mask of indignation. How dare you? I'll have all your badges for this. Archer lunged toward the hallway, nearly pulling Nora off her feet. The basement door stood at the end, 3 heavy deadbolts locked tight. We need the key, she called back. Subject claims she lost it, Officer Patel replied. Officer Rivera moved forward with a door jamb spreader. With each crack of splintering wood, Archer's barking intensified. When the door finally gave way, cold air rushed up from below. The stairwell was pitch black. Harlow, keep that dog controlled, Reynolds ordered. Nora released tension on Archer's lead just enough. Show me, she commanded softly. The basement stairs creaked under their weight. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Washer, dryer, storage boxes. Until the flashlight beams reached the back section. The rear portion had been converted into a makeshift classroom. A chalkboard hung on the wall. 3 child-sized desks were arranged in a row. Alphabet posters decorated the concrete walls alongside children's drawings. But it was the three small cots against the far wall that made Nora's blood run cold. A portable toilet stood in the corner, partially concealed by a folding screen. Huddled together on the middle cot, three children stared back at them with wide, terrified eyes. "Mapleton Police," Nora said softly, lowering herself to their level. "We're here to help you." Archer whined beside her, his posture softening. The oldest child, a girl with tangled brown hair, stared at the dog. "Is he going to hurt us?" she whispered. "No, sweetheart. Archer is a police dog. He's the one who knew you were down here." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "We tried to be quiet, like Miss Sinclair said. She told us if we made noise, bad people would take us away." "You're safe now," Nora assured her. "Can you tell me your names?" "I'm Emma, that's Deanne and Tyler." The names matched the missing person reports. Lieutenant Reynolds called for paramedics and Child Protective Services. "Emma, did Miss Sinclair hurt you?" Nora asked gently. The girl shook her head. "She said she was protecting us, that our parents didn't take care of us right." The youngest boy, Tyler, reached out toward Archer. Nora gave the command, and Archer approached with remarkable gentleness, allowing the boy to touch his head. "Dog," the child whispered, the first hint of a smile crossing his face. Nora noticed the careful organization of the space, the schedule posted on the wall, the relatively clean conditions. This wasn't impulsive, it was meticulously planned. Upstairs, Margaret sat handcuffed on her sofa, tears streaming down her face, but her expression defiant. "They were being neglected," she said when Nora approached. "Emma came to school in the same clothes for days. Dion's lunch account was empty for weeks. Tyler had bruises. I reported it repeatedly and nothing happened." "So you kidnapped them?" Nora's voice was ice. "I saved them," Margaret countered. "The system failed them, just like it failed my—" She stopped abruptly. "Failed your what, Miss Sinclair?" Margaret's eyes hardened. "You wouldn't understand. Those children needed protection." As officers led Margaret away, neighbors gathered behind the police tape, shocked to see their beloved teacher in handcuffs. Nora watched the ambulance where paramedics examined the children. Each child clutched a stuffed animal, small comfort after their ordeal. "Harlow," Lieutenant Reynolds approached. "We found something in Margaret's office." He pointed to files containing school records, notes on the children's home situations, copies of reports Margaret had filed with Child Protective Services, page after page of documentation of suspected neglect, most resulting in no action from authorities. "There's more," Reynolds said, showing a photo of a younger Margaret with a small boy. "Death certificate for Nathan Sinclair, age 8. Her son died in foster care after being removed from her custody due to allegations later determined to be unfounded." Nora stared at the photograph. She lost her child to the system, and now she thinks she's saving these kids from the same fate. Outside, Margaret was placed in a police car, her eyes locking with Nora's. Not with hatred, but with a strange understanding, as if passing a burden. Later, as Nora completed her report, Archer lay at her feet beside her desk. 3 new files were open, the children's cases. She picked up Emma's file, excessive absences, notes about hunger, multiple incidents documented by Margaret. CPS reports showed minimal follow-up. Cases closed due to insufficient evidence. A chill ran through her as she realized Margaret might have been right about one thing. The system had failed these children. Her phone lit up with a text from the hospital. "The youngest boy keeps asking for the dog. Any chance you can bring him by tomorrow?" Nora looked at Archer, who raised his head, always attuned to her moods. "Looks like we're not done with this case yet," she told him softly. "Not by a long shot." Nora and Archer entered the children's ward of Mapleton Memorial Hospital the following morning. The nurse at the station looked up with surprise at the police dog's tactical vest and official harness. "I'm Officer Harlow. Tyler Bennett was asking for us," Nora explained, fatigue visible in her face after a nearly sleepless night. The nurse nodded in recognition. "He's barely spoken since arriving. Dr. Winters thought the dog might help him open up." Inside the room, Tyler sat on the hospital bed, small in his oversized gown, staring blankly at cartoons on the television. His dark hair stood up in cowlicks, and bruises in various stages of healing marked his thin arms. "Tyler, someone's here to see you," the nurse announced softly. The boy turned slowly, his expression changing instantly at the sight of Archer. His eyes widened, the first real emotion he'd shown since being rescued. "Can I?" he whispered, voice barely audible. Nora commanded Archer forward. The Malinois approached the bed with careful steps and rested his head on the mattress. Tyler reached out tentatively to touch the dog's fur. "He found you," Nora said softly. "Archer knew you were in that basement. He wouldn't stop barking until we listened." Tears welled in Tyler's eyes. "Miss Sinclair said nobody would look for us, that nobody cared." "That's not true. We never stopped looking." It was a comforting lie. The cases had been low priority until Archer's behavior triggered her suspicions. "Is she going to jail?" Tyler asked, his fingers buried in Archer's fur. "Yes, she did a bad thing taking you away from your family." Tyler's face clouded. "She gave us food every day, and books, and nobody hurt us." Ice formed in Nora's stomach. Before she could respond, Dr. Winters appeared in the doorway, gesturing her outside. In the hallway, the doctor spoke quietly. "Tyler's case is concerning. X-rays show old fractures that never received proper treatment, and there are cigarette burns on his back, classic indicators of prolonged abuse." Nora felt sick. His father, mother's boyfriend? The mother is claiming no knowledge of the injuries and is blaming Margaret Sinclair. She's pushing to regain custody immediately. That's impossible. The medical evidence shows the injuries predate the kidnapping by months. Dr. Winters nodded grimly. The caseworker seems eager to reunite them quickly and close the file. Budget cuts have them overwhelmed. Nora glanced back at Tyler, who was gently stroking Archer's ears, whispering something only the dog could hear. "Not on my watch, Floyd," she said firmly. At the precinct, Lieutenant Reynolds leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. "You can't interfere with CPS, Harlow. It's not our jurisdiction. If Tyler's mother is making false accusations against our suspect, that directly impacts our investigation," Nora argued. "Margaret Sinclair kidnapped 3 children. Whatever her intentions, that's multiple felonies. And what happens when we send Tyler back to the same situation Sinclair rescued him from?" she pressed. Archer sat beside her chair, pressing against her leg, sensing her distress. His warm weight was grounding. Reynolds sighed. "Take the afternoon off, Harlow. Clear your head instead of getting emotionally involved." Nora drove to the county jail instead. Archer remained in the car as she was escorted inside. Margaret looked small in her orange jumpsuit, the fluorescent lights harsh against her skin. "Come to gloat?" she asked when Nora sat down across from her. "Tyler has cigarette burns and healed fractures. His mother is blaming you." Margaret laughed bitterly. "Of course she is. And they'll believe her because she's the mother, just like they believed my ex-husband." "Your son," Nora said quietly. "What happened?" Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Nathan was 7 when my ex wanted custody. He claimed I was abusive. They took Nathan immediately. 6 months later, he was dead. His foster father beat him so severely, his liver ruptured." "I'm sorry," Nora said, meaning it. "Sorry doesn't bring back my son," Margaret replied. "The system failed Nathan just like it's failing Tyler, Emma, and Dion. That doesn't justify kidnapping, does it?" "Doesn't it?" Margaret leaned forward. "I filed 13 reports about Tyler's injuries. I documented everything, took photos, followed every protocol, and nothing happened." Her voice rose. "What was I supposed to do? Watch him come to school with fresh burns while paperwork gathered dust?" Nora had no answer, her certainty wavering. "You have a good dog," Margaret added unexpectedly. "He knew something was wrong when everyone else ignored the signs." That evening, Nora parked outside Tyler's mother's apartment complex. The building was run down, graffiti covering the walls. Shouting erupted from Tyler's address, followed by the sound of glass breaking. "Stay," she ordered Archer before approaching the building. A man stumbled out of the apartment, reeking of alcohol. "You better have my money when I get back," he shouted behind him. He nearly collided with Nora on the stairs. "Problem, sir?" she asked, hand near her weapon. The man staggered away without answering. Through the open door, Nora saw Tyler's mother sweeping broken glass, a fresh bruise on her cheekbone. "Mapleton PD, mind if I come in?" Nora asked, showing her badge. The woman looked up, panic flashing in her eyes. "I didn't call police." "I'm Officer Harlow. I was involved in recovering your son, Tyler." The woman's voice turned honeyed. "Oh, I've been trying to get my baby back. These accusations are just terrible." Nora stepped inside, noting the ashtrays and liquor bottles. "How'd you get that bruise?" Bumped into a cabinet, she laughed nervously. The medical evidence shows Tyler was being abused before Miss Sinclair took him. The woman's facade cracked. You can't prove who did what. You filed a false report accusing Mrs. Sinclair of causing those injuries. That's a crime. Fear washed over her face. My boyfriend would kill me if Tyler talks. I can help you both, Nora said quietly. But not if you keep lying. Later, driving away, Nora felt the weight of her promise. The woman had admitted the boyfriend's abuse. Nora had connected her with resources for domestic violence victims. But one truth remained. Without Margaret's intervention, however illegal, Tyler might still be suffering. Every system designed to protect him had failed. The world's more complicated than they teach at the academy, isn't it, boy? She said to Archer. Her phone buzzed with a text from Reynolds. DA wants to meet tomorrow about Sinclair's case, pushing for maximum charges, 800 hours. She would have to decide loyalty to the law as written or to the justice it was meant to serve. The district attorney's office bustled with activity as Nora and Archer entered the following morning. Deputy DA Victoria Blackwell greeted them from behind her imposing desk. Is the dog necessary? She asked, eyeing Archer with distaste. He's my partner, Nora replied simply. Blackwell got straight to business. We're pushing for maximum charges against Sinclair. 3 counts of kidnapping, false imprisonment, child endangerment, the works. There are complications, Nora interrupted. Tyler Bennett was being abused at home before Sinclair took him. Irrelevant, Blackwell said dismissively. Sinclair had no legal right to take those children. She filed multiple reports with CPS. They were ignored. Again, irrelevant. Blackwell leaned forward, her expression hardening. I understand your sympathy, Officer Harlow, but she held children captive in a basement. The system wasn't working, Nora persisted. That's the point. Your job is to present facts to the jury, not evaluate the system, Blackwell countered. Can you testify objectively? Archer shifted at Nora's feet, sensing her tension. I can state the fact, Nora said carefully, but those facts include Tyler being returned to an abusive home despite clear evidence. This office is prosecuting Sinclair, not the foster system, Blackwell said coldly. I need witnesses who won't muddy the waters with irrelevancies. You want me to testify selectively? Your lieutenant mentioned you might be emotionally involved. Perhaps we should use Officer Patel instead. The implied threat hung in the air. That won't be necessary, Nora said, jaw tight. I'll testify to all relevant facts. Excellent. Blackwell closed the file with finality. Trials set for next month. Outside, Nora took a deep breath of fresh air. That wasn't justice, Archer. That was politics. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Winters. Tyler asking for you. Mother made scene at hospital. Need help. 20 minutes later, Nora stood with Dr. Winters and a CPS caseworker, Diana Martinez, in the hospital corridor. His mother showed up intoxicated, demanding to take him home, Winters explained. Security had to escort her out. We're trying for emergency foster placement, Martinez added, but the system is overloaded. The boyfriend has disappeared, so technically there's no immediate danger. No immediate danger? Nora couldn't hide her disbelief. The boy has cigarette burns. Martinez looked exhausted. Without the boyfriend present and without Tyler's testimony, we can't prove who caused the injuries. His mother claims Margaret Sinclair abused him. That's impossible. The medical report clearly states. The medical report is being contested, Martinez interrupted, frustration evident in her voice. Tyler sat on his hospital bed, arms wrapped around his knees. He looked up as Nora and Archer entered, his face brightening instantly. Hey, buddy, Nora said softly. Heard you had a rough morning. Tyler nodded, reaching for Archer. The boy buried his fingers in the dog's fur. My mom came, he said quietly. She was mad that I told about Gary. She said I was lying. Were you lying, Tyler? Nora asked gently. He shook his head. But it doesn't matter. They'll send me back, and Gary will come back too. His voice trailed off. Archer pushed his head against Tyler's arm, as if offering comfort. He understand, Tyler whispered. Would you tell what happened to help make sure you don't go back there? Nora asked. Fear flashed across his face. Mom will be mad. I know it's scary, but we can't help without the truth. Tyler was silent for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. Can Archer stay with me? Absolutely. An hour later, with a child advocate present, Tyler's statement had been recorded. Through it all, Archer remained pressed against the boy's side, a steady, calming presence. After Tyler fell asleep, Nora confronted Martinez in the hallway. Will this make a difference, or will he still end up with his mother? Martinez rubbed her temples. His testimony helps, but the mother will claim he was coached, without evidence against the boyfriend. So we get some, Nora said firmly. Back at the precinct, Lieutenant Reynolds listened to Nora's proposal with skepticism. Harlow, this isn't our case anymore. It's in CPS hands now. A crime was committed against a child in our jurisdiction, Nora countered. That's absolutely our case. We've got a double homicide, an armed robbery spree, and staffing issues. I can't allocate resources for this. So Tyler's case just falls through the cracks? I'm sympathetic, Harlow, but we have priorities. This is a priority, Nora insisted, her voice rising. A child's safety is CPS's job, Reynolds interrupted firmly. Not ours. At her desk, Nora pulled out Gary Mitchell's file. His record showed minor offenses, public intoxication, disorderly conduct, nothing that screamed child abuser. Officer Rivera stopped by her desk. Heard you're interested in Mitchell. Funny coincidence. I just got a call about a drunk causing problems at O'Malley's bar. Guess who it was? Nora looked up. Mitchell, got his current address too. Rivera slid a note across her desk. After her shift ended, Nora sat in her car outside the rundown motel where Mitchell was staying. Archer watched her from the passenger seat. This wasn't official police business, but a child's safety hung in the balance. Her phone buzzed with a text from Martinez. Court hearing tomorrow to determine if Tyler returns to mother. Nora's decision crystallized. Let's go, Archer. Mitchell opened the door of room 114, beer in hand. He was wiry with bloodshot eyes and 3 days stubble. Mr. Mitchell, Officer Harlow, Mapleton PD? I'd like to ask about Tyler Bennett. Mitchell's expression darkened. Don't know any Tyler. Your girlfriend's son, the boy who was taken by his teacher. Lisa's kid, not my business. He tried to close the door, but Nora blocked it with her foot. Actually, it is your business when the boy has cigarette burns matching your brand. Fear flickered across Mitchell's face. You got a warrant? Just questions right now. Lisa already explained that the crazy teacher did that stuff. Medical evidence says otherwise. Tyler gave a statement today, Gary. Mitchell's face contorted with anger. That little liar. I barely touched the kid. Lisa's the one who... He stopped abruptly. You the one who what? Nothing. We're done here. He closed the door firmly. Nora already had what she needed. His inadvertent admission and the hint that Tyler's mother might be involved too. As she walked back to her car, her phone rang. Officer Harlow, this is James Donovan, Margaret Sinclair's attorney. My client would like to speak with you about evidence she collected regarding Tyler's abuse. Nora looked at Archer, who sat watching her with patient eyes. Tell her I'll be there in 30 minutes. The lines between right and wrong were blurring, but one thing remained clear. A child needed protection, and Nora was running out of options. The detention center's visiting room was stark under fluorescent lights. Margaret Sinclair sat across from Nora. Orange jumpsuit, a stark contrast to her former teacher attire. Archer lay at Nora's feet, watchful. Thank you for coming, Margaret said. My lawyer said you might not. You mentioned evidence about Tyler's abuse. Margaret leaned forward. In my house master bedroom closet, there's a black lockbox. Combination 8147, my son's birthday. Inside are USB drives and notebooks documenting everything. Everything? Every injury on Tyler over 8 months. Photos, dates, explanations he gave, voice recordings, copies of every report I filed. All ignored. Why keep this from police until now? My lawyer advised against it. Said it would prove premeditation. A bitter smile crossed her face. But I realize you might care more about Tyler than protocol. Mrs. Sinclair, I can't just enter your home and take things. My sister has a key. Margaret slid a paper across the table. She'll meet you in an hour. Why not pursue legal channels? I tried 3 times. I went to your precinct. I was told it was a CPS matter. The last officer said, Lady, we've got real crimes to solve. Nora felt a flush of shame for her department. But kidnapping those children, I prefer rescue, Margaret interrupted. When Tyler came to school with cigarette burns for the 3rd time, I couldn't wait any longer. The guard called time. Margaret hesitated. One more thing. Check the signature on the CPS case closure forms. Tyler's case wasn't closed because allegations were unfounded, but because someone decided not to investigate. 30 minutes later, Nora met Catherine Sinclair, Margaret's sister, at the house. Margaret said, "You're the only one actually listening," Catherine said, unlocking the door. Inside, Catherine led them to the bedroom. "She keeps it in there. I'll be in the living room. I don't want to see it again." Nora found the lockbox behind a row of shoes. This wasn't proper procedure. No warrant, no chain of custody, but a child's safety hung in the balance. 8147, the lock clicked open. Inside were USB drives, notebooks, and photos meticulously documenting injuries on Tyler. Each photo had dates and descriptions in precise teacher handwriting. The notebooks contained detailed entries, observations, Tyler's explanations, Margaret's attempts to get help, page after page of institutional failure. Nora played an audio file. "Tyler, can you tell me how you got that mark on your arm?" Margaret's gentle voice. A child's hesitant voice. "I fell." "You fell onto something shaped like a cigarette?" Silence. "Tyler, no one is going to be angry with you for telling the truth. Gary gets real mad when Mom drinks, says I'm too loud." Nora stopped the recording, hands shaking. Archer pressed against her leg. At the bottom was a folder labeled Case Closures, containing 3 forms for Tyler, all signed by Director Pamela Griffith. Nora recognized the name. Griffith had been featured recently for implementing an efficiency protocol that had reduced CPS's backlog. The article had quoted Lieutenant Reynolds praising the interagency cooperation. Back in her car, Nora called Martinez. "It's Harlow. I need to ask about Pamela Griffith." "Where did you hear that name?" Martinez sounded wary. "She signed off on multiple closures of Tyler Bennett's case. I'm not supposed to discuss internal—" "Martinez, please. This is about a child going before a judge tomorrow." A pause. "Griffith's protocols are why I have 67 cases instead of 40. Cases aren't being investigated. They're being closed to improve metrics. Is that legal? If preliminary assessment doesn't show imminent danger, a case can be closed without full investigation. And who defines imminent danger under Griffith? The threshold has become nearly impossible to meet." At a coffee shop, Nora showed Margaret's evidence to Martinez. The caseworker's expression grew grim. "This is what I suspected but could never prove," Martinez said. "Cases being closed to boost statistics. Can we use this to help Tyler?" "Not directly, chain of custody issues, but I can request a formal review citing procedural violations. That creates a 72-hour hold on custody decisions, buying us time. Do it, and I can reference this evidence without citing its source." Later that night, Nora reviewed Margaret's notebooks. The documentation painted a damning picture, not just of Tyler's abusers, but of a system that had abandoned him. Her phone rang. "Lieutenant Reynolds." "Harlow, got a call from the DA's office. Blackwell says you visited Sinclair without authorization." "It was a follow-up interview." "Not according to Blackwell. She says Sinclair's lawyer called about evidence." "Sir, whatever you're doing, stop now. This case is simple. Teacher kidnapped kids, teacher goes to jail. Don't make it complicated." "With respect, sir, it is complicated." A heavy sigh. "Harlow, I'm trying to protect your career. There are connections between Griffith and people above my pay grade. Politics, stay away from it." The call ended. Reynolds knew about Griffith's manipulation and was warning her off. Her phone buzzed with a text from Martinez. "Review filed, hearing postponed, 72 hours gained, but Griffith's asking questions about who prompted the review." Nora placed the evidence in her safe. Tomorrow, she would need to find a way to make this evidence admissible, not just for Tyler's custody hearing, but for a larger investigation. As she climbed into bed, Archer settling at her feet, Nora thought about Margaret Sinclair, sitting in jail for trying to protect children when no one else would. The woman had broken the law, no question, but had justice been served? Tomorrow would bring Tyler's postponed hearing, Blackwell's anger, Reynolds' warnings, and Griffith's scrutiny. But it would also bring a chance to do what she had sworn to do: protect the innocent. Archer rested his head on her ankle in silent solidarity. "Tomorrow is going to be rough," she whispered, "but we're doing the right thing." The question that haunted her was whether doing the right thing would be enough to save Tyler, and whether the price might be her badge. Nora stood outside family court the next morning, rain collecting on the marble steps. Archer sat beside her, his tactical vest gleaming with droplets. Inside, Tyler's future was being decided in a closed hearing. Despite Martinez's 72-hour hold, Judge Carmichael had called an emergency conference after pressure from Griffith's office. Nora wasn't permitted inside. Her phone buzzed. "Harlow," Lieutenant Reynolds' voice was tight. "Where are you?" "On personal time, sir, at family court." "I figured," his voice tightened further. "There's a complaint from Griffith. Says you're interfering with CPS operations." "That's not true. Truth doesn't matter when politics are involved. Get back to the precinct. Captain wants to see you." Nora ended the call. Archer whined softly, pressing against her leg. "I know, boy, but we can't just leave." Her phone buzzed again. Martinez. "Mother's lawyer arguing procedural issues. Griffith here in person. Need more time." Nora made her decision. "Come on, Archer." Instead of heading to the precinct, she drove to Channel 7 News. Rebecca Zhang, an investigative reporter, had once given Nora her card after a press conference. "You seem like someone who cares about the truth," Zhang had said. "If you ever have a story that needs telling, call me." The time had come. Zhang met them in the lobby. "Officer Harlow, this is unexpected. I need 5 minutes, off the record for now." In Zhang's office, Nora laid out the facts. Abuse cases closed to improve metrics, the evidence she'd found, the pressure to look away. "This is explosive," Zhang said, "but I need more than your word. There's a child at risk right now because of this corruption." Zhang's eyes narrowed. "The Bennett boy from the Sinclair case?" "Yes, his life is in danger if he goes back to that home. I can't intervene in an active court case." "I'm not asking you to, but the public should know about the systemic issues. How many children are being endangered because someone wants better statistics? Why come to me? Why not internal affairs?" "Because there's no time and some things are more important than a badge." Her phone buzzed. Martinez. Judge leaning toward returning Tyler to mother. "Need something concrete now?" Archer pressed his head into her hand, sensing her distress. "I have to go," Nora said. "Think about what I've told you." Outside the courthouse, Martinez waited, dark circles under her eyes. "It's not going well," she said. "Griffith has convinced the judge the review is just a delay tactic." "What about Tyler's testimony?" "The mother's lawyer is arguing he was coached. We need something the judge can't ignore." Nora thought of her safe, of Mitchell's confession. None of it properly collected, none of it admissible. Her phone rang. Rebecca Zhang. "I've been making calls," Zhang said. "Found 3 former CPS workers who've confirmed Griffith's manipulation. 2 will go on record. That might help eventually, but there's a hearing happening now." "There's more. Remember that domestic disturbance call involving Mitchell last year? I have the original police report. Hospital records show Tyler was treated for accidental injuries that same night." Nora's pulse quickened. "That's public record, admissible. I'm texting you the case number." Inside the courtroom, Nora slipped the information to Martinez, who requested the records be entered into evidence. Judge Carmichael granted a recess to review the material. In the hallway, Tyler's mother glared at Nora. Archer sat at attention, eyes tracking the woman. He had been there when they found Tyler, when they interviewed him. He knew. The courtroom doors opened. Martinez emerged with a tight smile. "The judge is ordering a full investigation before any custody decision. Tyler stays in emergency care for now." Nora exhaled. "And Griffith?" "The judge has questions about why the earlier incident wasn't in Tyler's CPS file. It wasn't a complete victory, but a child would be safe tonight." As they walked out, Captain Morris waited by her car. "Harlow, I've been looking for you." "Sir, I can explain." "Save it, your badge and weapon now." Nora felt a strange calm as she handed them over. Archer stood steady beside her. "You're suspended pending investigation. Department has concerns about your judgment. Your unauthorized actions is protecting a child interference, sir." Morris's expression softened slightly. "The job has rules, Harlow. Some rules deserve to be broken. That's not your call to make." Morris sighed. "Go home, there'll be a hearing next week." As Morris walked away, Nora felt uncertainty wash over her. Her career might be over, but looking at Archer, at his unwavering loyalty, she couldn't regret her choices. Her phone rang. Rebecca Zhang. "I'm running the story tomorrow. System failed, how statistics trumped child safety." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This will create a firestorm." "Ready for that?" Nora thought about Margaret Sinclair, still in jail for trying to protect children, about Tyler, temporarily safe but still in a broken system, about all the other children whose cases had been closed to make numbers look better. "Yes," she said, "I'm ready." That evening, Nora sat on her porch watching rain cascade from the eaves. Archer lay beside her, head on her lap. Her phone had buzzed all afternoon. Colleagues, friends, even Reynolds with a message. Part anger, part grudging respect. The text that mattered most came from Martinez. "Tyler asking about you and Archer. Says you promised to visit. Badge or no badge, some promises transcended official capacity." Nora scratched behind Archer's ears. "We did the right thing, didn't we, boy?" Archer looked up, amber eyes reflecting complete certainty. Tomorrow would bring consequences, headlines, investigations, her career in jeopardy. But tonight, there was only this truth. A child was safe because they had listened when others wouldn't. Nora's phone lit up with a text from Margaret Sinclair's lawyer. "Prosecution offering deal in light of new evidence. Meet tomorrow?" The story wasn't over, but looking at Archer, who had sensed the truth from the beginning, Nora knew which path she would choose. Some things were worth more than a badge. Some duties went beyond any oath of office. They had listened, they had believed. And because of that, a child would sleep safely for the first time in too long. In the end, wasn't that why she had become a police officer in the first place? Not for the badge, not for the rules, but for moments exactly like this. 3 days later, Nora sat across from Captain Morris in his office. The morning papers lay on his desk, headlines screaming about the CPS scandal. 2 more officers flanked Morris, part of the disciplinary committee. "Officer Harlow," Morris began formally, "your actions violated department protocol on multiple counts. You conducted an unauthorized investigation, accessed evidence without a warrant, and interfered with another agency's jurisdiction." Nora sat straight-backed, Archer at her side. "Yes, sir. However," Morris continued, his tone shifting, "in light of recent developments, including Director Griffith's resignation and the criminal investigation into falsified records, the committee has decided to modify your punishment." Nora's breath caught. 2 weeks suspension without pay, followed by 6 months probation. Your badge and weapon will be returned upon completion of the suspension. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me," Morris said gruffly. The mayor's office made calls after the media coverage. "This is politics, just different politics than before." As she left the office, Lieutenant Reynolds intercepted her. "You got lucky, Harlow." "It wasn't luck, it was doing the right thing." Reynolds shook his head. "The right thing could have ended your career. Some things are worth that risk." "Maybe," Reynolds conceded. "The DA's office called. They're reviewing Sinclair's case. Blackwell's been taken off it." That afternoon, Nora and Archer visited Tyler at his new foster home. The boy's face lit up when he saw them. "You came back," he exclaimed, throwing his arms around Archer. "I promised we would," Nora said, watching as Tyler led Archer to show him his new room. Tyler's foster mother, Elena Ramirez, Diana Martinez's cousin, smiled. "He's doing better, sleeping through the night now. Talks about you and that dog constantly. Any word on his mother?" "She's entered rehab. Mitchell's facing charges." Elena lowered her voice. "Tyler's been asking about Miss Sinclair. Says he misses her stories." Nora's next stop was the county jail. Margaret looked better than their last meeting, less haunted. "I heard you were suspended," Margaret said. "I'm sorry." 2 weeks, worth it." "Tell her?" "Safe, good foster home." Margaret nodded, relief washing over her face. "My lawyer says they're offering a deal. Probation, no jail time, if I plead to a lesser charge." "Will you take it?" "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to fight, to make them admit the system failed those children." "The system is admitting it," Nora said. "Griffith resigned. There's an investigation. Your evidence helped make that happen. Not enough to save my son." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "No," Nora agreed softly, "but maybe enough to save others." 2 weeks later, Nora returned to duty. The precinct had changed. Officers who had once avoided her now nodded respectfully. Her desk held a small pile of case files, all involving children, all with notes from Reynolds saying, "Thought you might want to look at these." Archer settled at her feet as she reviewed the first file. Her phone buzzed with a text from Martinez. Permanent placement hearing for Tyler next month. Ramirez family wants to adopt. He's asking if you'll come. Another text arrived from Rebecca Zhang. Follow-up story running tomorrow. Interview with Sinclair. She's out on bail. And a final message, this one from Margaret. Taking the deal. Starting foundation for children failed by the system. Need a law enforcement advisor. Interested? Nora looked down at Archer, who gazed back with unwavering trust. Looks like we've got our work cut out for us, partner, she said. 6 months later, Nora stood in the courthouse hallway, Archer beside her in his service vest. Tyler emerged from the courtroom, hand in hand with Elena and her husband, his face split by an enormous grin. It's official, he announced. I'm Tyler Ramirez now. He knelt to hug Archer, who licked his face enthusiastically. Margaret Sinclair stood nearby, watching with a bittersweet smile. Her foundation, Second Chances, had already helped identify dozens of cases like Tyler's that had been improperly closed. He looks happy, Margaret said softly. He is, Nora confirmed, and safe. That's all I wanted. Margaret's voice caught. For all of them, as they watched Tyler with his new family, Nora thought about the chain of events that had led them here. A teacher who crossed the line to protect children, a dog who wouldn't stop barking at a locked basement door, a police officer who chose justice over rules. You know, Margaret said, I still believe I did the right thing, even if it wasn't the legal thing. I know, Nora replied. That's the hardest part of the job. When right and legal aren't the same. What do you do then? Nora looked down at Archer, who had been the first to sense the truth, the first to demand action. You listen to your conscience, she said, and sometimes you listen to your dog. Tyler ran over, excitement radiating from him. Officer Nora, my new parents say I can get a dog. Can we go to the shelter so Archer can help me pick one? Nora smiled. I think he'd like that very much. As they walked out into the sunlight, Archer leading the way, Nora reflected on how a single decision to trust her partner's instincts had changed so many lives. The system wasn't perfect, might never be perfect, but today at least it had worked. And sometimes that had to be enough. 1 year later, the classroom fell silent as Nora and Archer entered. 20 eager faces turned toward them, eyes wide with excitement. Everyone, this is Officer Harlow and her K-9 partner Archer, Margaret Sinclair announced to her students. They're here to talk about safety and how police dogs help protect our community. After her probation ended, Margaret had been allowed to return to teaching, though at a different school. Her case had become a catalyst for reform in both the police department and child protective services. As Nora began her presentation, she noticed Tyler sitting in the back row. Now 10, he looked healthier, more confident. He gave her a small wave, which she returned. After the presentation, while the children took turns meeting Archer under Margaret's supervision, Tyler approached Nora. I'm going to be a K-9 officer when I grow up, he declared. Like you. It's a lot of work, Nora said. I know, but I want to help kids like me. He glanced at Archer. And dogs know things people don't sometimes. They certainly do, Nora agreed. Later, as they walked to her patrol car, Margaret joined them. Thank you for coming, she said. The children loved it. How are things going, Nora asked. Better than I expected. The foundation is helping change policies. The new CPS director actually listens. Margaret smiled. And I get to teach again, which is all I ever wanted. And the children from the basement? Emma's back with her father. He got custody after the divorce. Dion's with his grandmother now. Both doing well. Margaret's expression softened. They visit sometimes. As they said goodbye, Nora watched Margaret return to her classroom. Not a basement hideaway, but a proper classroom filled with light and children's laughter. In the car, Archer settled into the passenger seat, alert as always. Ready for patrol? She asked him. The radio crackled to life. Unit 27, we've got a welfare check at 15 and 80 Pine Street. Neighbor reports hearing a child crying for several hours. Archer's ears perked up before Nora even reached for the radio. Copy that, dispatch. Unit 27 responding. As they drove through Mapleton streets, Nora glanced at her partner. Let's go see who needs us today, she said. Archer's steady gaze told her everything she needed to know. Whatever they found, they would face it together. Guardian and Echo, each amplifying the other's purpose, each making the other whole. The morning sun slanted through the blinds of Detective Elijah Mercer's office, casting striped shadows across his desk. The coffee in his mug had gone cold hours ago, forgotten as he pored over case files. 3 children missing in the past month, all from the same school district, all with troubled home lives. "You're overthinking this, Mercer," said Detective Ramirez, leaning against the doorframe. "Kids with problems at home run away. It happens." Elijah looked up, dark circles under his eyes betraying his lack of sleep. 3 kids from the same school, all classified as runaways with minimal investigation? Something doesn't add up. What doesn't add up is you obsessing over this when we've got a double homicide downtown. Ramirez sighed. "Captain wants you at the briefing in 10. After she left, Elijah stared at the photos spread before him. Emma Reyes, 8. Dion Washington, 9. Tyler Bennett, 7. All students at Oak Ridge Elementary. All reported missing by relatives who, according to the initial reports, didn't seem particularly distressed by their disappearance." His phone buzzed with a text from Officer Harlow. "Something you should see. Oak Ridge Elementary. Meet me there at 3. Elijah had worked with Nora Harlow and her K-9 partner Archer on several cases. She had good instincts, and her dog had even better ones. At 3:15, Elijah pulled into the school parking lot. Children streamed out of the building, backpacks bouncing, voices raised in end-of-day excitement. Nora stood by her patrol car, Archer sitting attentively at her side. "Thanks for coming," she said as he approached. "I know you're working the missing children cases." "Trying to. Department's not giving them priority." Nora nodded toward the school. "There's a teacher here, Margaret Sinclair, 3rd grade. All 3 missing children participated in her after-school reading program." Elijah's interest sharpened. "That wasn't in any of the reports." "It wouldn't be. The program isn't official, just something she does for kids who need extra help." Nora hesitated. "There's something else. Archer's been acting strange whenever we drive past her house on patrol. Agitated. Any other officer, Elijah might have dismissed this. But he'd seen Archer work. Her house is on your patrol route?" "Not exactly. I've been checking it. Call it a hunch." Inside the school, they waited outside Margaret Sinclair's classroom. Through the window, Elijah observed a petite woman with silver-streaked auburn hair, working with 2 children. Her manner was patient, her smile genuine. "She's been Teacher of the Year 3 times, Nora said quietly. "Volunteers, church choir, the works. Not exactly fitting our kidnapper profile." "No, but neither is her basement having 3 new deadbolts installed last month." Elijah turned to her. "How do you know that?" "I knocked on her door last week. Routine community policing. She was polite but didn't invite me in. Archer went crazy, pulling toward the back of the house. The classroom door opened, and Margaret Sinclair emerged with the children. "Remember to practice those vocabulary words," she told them warmly. "I'll see you tomorrow." As the children departed, she noticed Nora and Elijah. "Officer Harlow, nice to see you again. And you are?" "Detective Mercer, Mapleton PD." He showed his badge. "Do you have a moment to talk about some of your students?" Margaret's smile never wavered. "Of course, please, come in." Inside the classroom, Margaret sat at her desk, hands folded. "Which students are you inquiring about?" "Emma Reyes, Dion Washington, and Tyler Bennett." Something flickered in Margaret's eyes, so briefly Elijah almost missed it. "Such a shame about those children. I've been quite worried." "You had them in your after-school reading program?" "Yes. Bright children, all of them. Just lacking proper support at home." She sighed. "I tried to provide stability they weren't getting elsewhere." "When did you last see each of them?" Margaret recited dates that matched the missing person reports. Her answers were precise, rehearsed. "Have you noticed anything unusual about their behavior before they disappeared? Any signs of where they might have gone?" "Detective, these children come from difficult circumstances. Emma's father is absent, her mother works 3 jobs. Dion's grandmother can barely manage him. And Tyler," her voice hardened slightly, "Tyler would come to school with unexplained injuries. I reported it multiple times." "Prevail to whom?" "Child Protective Services. They did nothing." As they continued talking, Archer, who had been lying quietly by the door, suddenly stood and began growling softly, eyes fixed on Margaret. "Is your dog all right?" Margaret asked, tension creeping into her voice. "He's fine," Nora replied. "It's just restless." When they left, Elijah walked silently to his car, mind racing. "What do you think?" Nora asked. "I think she's hiding something. Whether it's related to the missing children, I don't know." He glanced at Archer. "But I've learned to trust this guy's instincts." "So what now?" Elijah considered. "We need to see inside that house. We don't have probable cause for a warrant." "Not yet." Elijah looked back at the school. "But we will." That night, Elijah sat in his car across from Margaret Sinclair's house. The modest colonial was dark except for a light in what appeared to be the kitchen. At 11:30, that light went out. He waited 30 minutes before approaching the house. This wasn't official police business. Not yet. But his instincts were screaming that something was wrong. The backyard was well maintained, with a small garden and patio. Elijah moved quietly to a basement window, shining his pen light through the glass. The beam revealed a washer, dryer, storage boxes, a normal basement. But as he shifted position, the light caught something else. The edge of what looked like a chalkboard. His phone vibrated, a text from Nora. "Found something. CPS records show Sinclair had a son who died in foster care 10 years ago. Removed from her custody, allegations later proven false." The pieces began to fall into place. A teacher who lost her child to the system, who repeatedly reported abuse of her students with no result, who might have decided to take matters into her own hands. The next morning, Elijah presented his findings to Captain Morris. 3 children, all from troubled homes, all in Sinclair's special program, all reported missing within weeks of each other. Her son died in foster care after being wrongfully removed from her custody, and Officer Harlow's K-9 shows strong alert behavior at her residence. Morris was skeptical. "That's circumstantial at best, Mercer. Sinclair is a respected member of the community, which is why we need to move carefully. I'm not saying arrest her, just surveillance and a warrant to search the house. Based on a dog's behavior and coincidental timing, judge will laugh us out of court. Then let me talk to her again. Officially this time." Morris sighed. "Fine, take Ramirez with you, but tread lightly." When they arrived at Margaret's house that afternoon, she greeted them with the same pleasant smile, though wariness lurked in her eyes. "Detective Mercer back so soon, and with a colleague this time." "Miss Sinclair, we'd like to ask you some additional questions about the missing children," Elijah said. "May we come in?" Inside, Margaret served tea in delicate china cups. Her hands were steady, her manner composed. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," Elijah began. "You mentioned reporting Tyler's injuries to CPS multiple times." "Yes, they did nothing." "That must have been frustrating." "It was infuriating," Margaret corrected. "The system is broken, Detective. You experienced that firsthand with your son, Nathan." Margaret's cup froze halfway to her lips. "You've been investigating me." "We're investigating missing children, Miss Sinclair. Your connection to them is relevant." "Nathan has nothing to do with this." "Doesn't he? A child wrongfully taken from you, who died in the care of those meant to protect him. 3 vulnerable children you tried to help through proper channels, only to be ignored." Margaret set down her cup with deliberate care. "I think you should leave now. We'd like to see your basement first." "Tom, do you have a warrant?" "No, but we can get one." "Then I suggest you do exactly that." Margaret stood. "Until then, I believe our conversation is over." Outside, Ramirez shook her head. "Morris was right. We've got nothing solid." "She's hiding something," Elijah insisted. "Did you see how she reacted when I mentioned her son?" "Grief, Mercer, not guilt." But Elijah wasn't convinced. That evening, he called Nora. "We need to move faster. She knows we're on to her." "I've been watching the house," Nora replied. "She's been making calls all afternoon, looking agitated. If she has those children, she might move them, or worse." "What? What do you need from me?" Elijah hesitated. What he was about to suggest could end both their careers. Archer's alert behavior would constitute probable cause if we documented it properly. Nora understood immediately. "You want me to bring him to the house officially, get his reaction on body cam?" "Yes, tonight." 3 hours later, Elijah waited in his car as Nora approached Margaret's front door with Archer. The dog began pulling at his leash immediately, barking with increasing urgency. When Margaret answered, Nora's body cam captured everything. Archer's clear alert behavior, Margaret's nervous demeanor, her refusal to allow them to check the basement. It was enough. Judge Watkins signed the warrant at 11:45 p.m. By midnight, 6 police vehicles surrounded Margaret Sinclair's house. Captain Morris supervised as officers prepared to enter. "Remember, if there are children inside, we need to minimize trauma," Morris instructed. "Harlow and Archer take point once we're in." The breach was swift and controlled. Margaret appeared at the top of the stairs in a bathrobe, outraged but not surprised. The basement door had 3 heavy deadbolts, just as Nora had reported. When they finally broke through, what they found left everyone in stunned silence. The rear portion had been converted into a classroom. A chalkboard hung on the wall, 3 child-sized desks were arranged in a row, alphabet posters decorated the concrete walls, and against the far wall, 3 small cots. On them, 3 children stared back with frightened eyes. "Mapleton Police," Nora said gently, kneeling. "We're here to help you." The oldest child, Emma, looked at Archer. "Is he going to hurt us?" "No, sweetheart. He's the one who found you." As paramedics examined the children, Elijah confronted Margaret in her living room. "Why?" he asked simply. Margaret's composure had finally cracked, tears streaming down her face. "They were being neglected and abused. I reported it through proper channels. Nothing happened. So you took them." "I saved them," she corrected fiercely. "Emma was coming to school hungry. Dion was left alone for days. Tyler had cigarette burns on his arms. That wasn't your decision to make, wasn't it? After what happened to Nathan?" Margaret's eyes burned with conviction. "The system failed these children, just like it failed my son. I couldn't let history repeat itself." As officers led Margaret away, Elijah watched the ambulance where the children were being treated. They seemed physically unharmed, even well cared for. But kidnapping was still kidnapping, no matter the intention. In Margaret's office, they found meticulous documentation of the children's home situations. Photos of injuries, copies of CPS reports, notes on behaviors indicating abuse or neglect. "She was building cases," Nora observed, as if she thought she could eventually prove she was right to take them. The following weeks brought complications no one had anticipated. Medical examinations confirmed Tyler's prior abuse. His mother initially blamed Margaret, but eventually admitted her boyfriend had hurt the boy. Emma's mother, overwhelmed with multiple jobs, had barely noticed her daughter's absence. Dion's elderly grandmother confessed she could no longer care for him. Meanwhile, the children themselves showed no fear of Margaret. If anything, they missed her. "She read us stories," Emma told Elijah during an interview. "Made sure we did our homework. Nobody ever did that before." The district attorney struggled with how to proceed. Margaret had clearly broken the law, but the circumstances were extraordinary. Public opinion was divided. Some called her a kidnapper, others a hero. 6 months later, Margaret Sinclair stood before Judge Watkins for sentencing. She had pleaded guilty to reduced charges. "Ms. Sinclair, your actions, while born of concern for these children, were fundamentally wrong," the judge stated. "You took the law into your own hands. However, I cannot ignore that your intervention exposed serious failures in our child protection system." The sentence, 5 years probation, no jail time, with mandatory community service establishing a foundation to help reform the very system she had circumvented. Outside the courthouse, Elijah approached Margaret. "I don't regret what I did," she told him quietly. "Those children are safe now because someone finally paid attention." "There were other ways," Elijah argued. "Were there? How many reports did it take before you investigated? How many children slipped through the cracks every day?" Elijah had no answer. A year later, Elijah sat across from Nora at a coffee shop. Archer dozed under the table. "The foundation's making progress," Nora said, sliding a brochure across the table. Second Chances featured Margaret's organization, now partnering with both the police department and CPS to identify at-risk children and ensure proper follow-up. And the children? Emma's with her father now. He got custody after the publicity. Dion's in a good foster home. And Tyler was adopted by Diana Martinez's cousin and her husband. And Sinclair? Teaching again, different school. Under supervision, of course. Elijah shook his head. "I still don't know how I feel about the outcome. She committed serious crimes." "She did," Nora agreed. "But sometimes justice is complicated." Their conversation was interrupted by Elijah's phone. A new case. Child reported missing, last seen 2 days ago. As they parted ways, Elijah found himself hoping this child had someone like Margaret Sinclair in their life. someone who noticed, someone who cared enough to act. Not by breaking the law, but by refusing to look away. Because sometimes the shadows of protection were cast by unlikely guardians. The fluorescent lights of Mapleton County Jail buzzed overhead as Margaret Sinclair sat across from her attorney, James Donovan. 6 months had passed since her arrest for kidnapping Emma, Dion, and Tyler. 6 months of legal battles, public scrutiny, and soul-searching. The DA is offering a deal, Donovan explained. 5 years probation, no jail time, in exchange for a guilty plea to reduce charges. Margaret's hands remained steady as she considered the offer. And the children? Emma's with her father now. He gained emergency custody after the publicity exposed her mother's neglect. Dion's grandmother surrendered custody. He's in foster care but doing well. Tyler's case is more complicated. Because of the abuse, Margaret said quietly. Yes, his mother initially denied knowledge of her boyfriend's actions, but evidence proved otherwise. She's facing charges herself now. Margaret closed her eyes briefly. So I was right about all three of them? Being right doesn't make what you did legal, Donovan reminded her gently. But it has influenced how your case is being handled. Later that day, Officer Nora Harlow visited Margaret, Archer at her side. The K-9 that had detected the children in Margaret's basement approached her without his earlier aggression, sensing she posed no threat. Officer Harlow, Margaret greeted her. I didn't expect to see you again. I wanted to update you personally. Tyler's been placed with the Ramirez family, Diana Martinez's cousins. They're planning to adopt him. Relief washed over Margaret's face. They're good people? The best. Elena Ramirez is a pediatric nurse. Her husband teaches music. Margaret nodded, tears threatening. Thank you for telling me. There's something else. The investigation into CPS has revealed systemic problems. Director Griffith resigned yesterday after evidence showed she closed cases to improve statistics. Including Tyler's? Yes, your documentation helped expose the pattern. Margaret smiled sadly. Small comfort when I'm facing prison. About that, the DA's deal. Are you taking it? Do I have a choice? Not much of one, Nora admitted. But if you accept, you could still make a difference. How? The community service portion. You could help build something to prevent what happened to Nathan, to those 3 children. For the first time since her arrest, Margaret felt a flicker of hope. A foundation, she said slowly, to advocate for children the system overlooks. Exactly. 2 weeks later, Margaret stood before Judge Carmichael, pleading guilty to custodial interference, a far cry from the kidnapping charges initially filed. Ms. Sinclair, the judge said, your actions, while born of concern for these children, circumvented legal processes designed to protect both children and parental rights. However, I cannot ignore that your intervention ultimately revealed serious failures in our child protection system. The sentence came as expected. 5 years probation, 2,000 hours of community service establishing a foundation to help reform the system she had bypassed. Outside the courthouse, Detective Elijah Mercer watched as Margaret was swarmed by supporters. Parents, teachers, child advocates who had rallied to her cause. Still think we did the right thing? Nora asked, joining him. We followed the law, Elijah replied. Whether that was right, I'm less certain than I was 6 months ago. The system failed those kids before she took them. And that justifies kidnapping? Elijah asked, though his voice lacked conviction. No, Nora admitted, but it explains it. She watched as Margaret spoke quietly with a reporter. Sometimes I wonder what I would have done in her position. Let's hope you never have to find out. 6 months later, Second Chance's Foundation opened its doors in a renovated Victorian house 3 blocks from the courthouse. Margaret Sinclair, now serving as its director under the supervision of her probation officer, had transformed her teaching skills into advocacy work. The foundation partnered with both the police department and the Reformed Child Protective Services to create rapid response protocols for at-risk children. Social workers, legal advocates, and counselors worked together under one roof to ensure no child's case would be closed for mere statistical improvement. On a crisp autumn morning, Nora brought Archer to the Foundation's official opening. The Belgian Malinois, now sporting a therapy dog certification alongside his police credentials, had become something of a mascot for the organization. Margaret greeted them at the door. Officer Harlow, I'm so glad you could come. It's impressive what you've accomplished in such a short time, Yards, Nora said, looking around at the bustling activity. I had motivation, Margaret replied, and surprising support. She nodded toward Detective Mercer, who was speaking with the new CPS director across the room. Elijah's been helping? He's on our advisory board. Said he wanted to make sure we stayed on the right side of the law. A small smile crossed Margaret's face, but I think he also wanted to understand. Understand what? Why I did what I did, whether he would have done the same. Before Nora could respond, a small figure burst through the door and made a beeline for Archer. "Tyler!" Margaret exclaimed, her professional composure momentarily slipping. The boy, now 8 and vibrant with health, dropped to his knees beside Archer, who recognized him immediately and pressed his muzzle against the child's chest in greeting. "Miss Sinclair, Officer Nora. Look, I got new glasses." Tyler pointed proudly to his red frames. "And I'm reading chapter books now." Behind him, Elena Ramirez entered with an apologetic smile. "Sorry, he couldn't wait to show you both." Margaret knelt to Tyler's level. "That's wonderful news. I always knew you were a brilliant reader." Tyler beamed, then lowered his voice conspiratorially. "Mom says I can get a dog for my birthday. Can Archer help me pick one from the shelter?" Nora smiled. "I think he'd like that very much." As Tyler chattered excitedly about his new school and friends, Nora watched Margaret's face. Joy mingled with the shadow of what might have been. This child had once been hidden in her basement, yet there was no fear, no trauma in his interaction with her, only trust. Later, as the official ceremony began, Nora found herself standing beside Elijah. "Tyler seems to be thriving," he observed. "The Ramirez family is everything he needed," Nora agreed. "And he still gets to see Margaret. Supervised, of course. Part of her probation conditions," Elijah noted, "though I'm not sure it's necessary anymore." Having second thoughts about the case, Detective? Elijah considered the question. "Not about arresting her. What she did was wrong, legally and ethically, but sometimes I wonder if I would have done anything different in her place. If it had been my child dying in foster care, then watching other children suffer the same fate while the system ignored them." He shook his head. "I'd like to think I would have found another way." "There should have been another way," Nora said quietly. "That's what this place is trying to create." The ceremony concluded with Margaret unveiling the Foundation's mission statement, prominently displayed in the entrance hall. "Every child deserves a voice. Every voice deserves to be heard." As the crowd dispersed, Nora noticed Tyler sitting on a window seat, reading a book to Archer, who listened with apparent interest. "He reads to Archer every time we visit," Elena Ramirez said, joining her. "Says Archer is the best listener because he doesn't interrupt to correct him. Smart kid." "He is, and resilient." Elena lowered her voice. "He still has nightmares sometimes, but not about being in Margaret's basement. They're about before, about Gary and his mother." "Has he talked about that time with Margaret?" "Says it was like being at school all the time, but safer. She never hurt them, you know. Kept them on schedule, made sure they did schoolwork, read to them every night." Elena shook her head. "I can't condone what she did, but those 3 months might have been the most stability he'd ever known." The complexity of the situation settled over Nora anew. Margaret had committed serious crimes, yet her actions had ultimately saved 3 children from situations that might have eventually claimed their lives. As they prepared to leave, Margaret approached Nora one last time. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "For what?" "For listening. That day when Archer wouldn't stop barking at my basement door, you could have dismissed it, but you didn't. You listened to him. Just doing my job." Margaret smiled sadly. "We both know that's not true. Most officers would have walked away, filed it as a false alarm." She glanced toward Tyler. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if you hadn't come back with that warrant. The children would still be in your basement. For how long, though?" "I wasn't thinking clearly by then. The stress, the fear of discovery." Margaret's voice trailed off. "I told myself I was saving them, but I was trapping all of us in an impossible situation." Nora considered this admission. "You know, when we found them, Emma told me you said they had to be quiet, or bad people would take them away." "I believed that then," Margaret acknowledged. But the real bad people weren't the police or CPS. They were the adults who hurt those children and the broken system that allowed it to continue. She straightened her shoulders. That's why this foundation matters. We can't fix everything, but we can make sure more people listen when children need help. 1 year later, Nora sat at her desk reviewing case files when her phone rang. Diana Martinez from CPS, now working closely with Second Chances. "We've got a situation," Martinez said without preamble. 10-year-old girl, multiple hospital visits for accidents. Teacher reported concerns 3 times. Mother's boyfriend just made bail on domestic violence charges. Whoa, where is she now? School. Mother's picking her up in an hour. And you're calling me because we need to move fast and I need someone who won't get bogged down in bureaucracy. The system's better than it was, but still not fast enough sometimes. Nora glanced at Archer, who had perked up at her sudden alertness. "Text me the address. We'll do a welfare check. Get eyes on the situation." "Thanks, Harlow. The foundation's sending a legal advocate to meet you there." 30 minutes later, Nora and Archer waited outside Westside Elementary. The legal advocate from Second Chances, a former family court judge named Robert Chen, arrived shortly after. "Officer Harlow," he greeted her. "Thanks for responding so quickly. Let's be clear. This is an official welfare check based on credible concerns. Nothing more." Chen nodded. "Understood. We're here to support, not interfere." As they spoke, a girl emerged from the school building. She was thin with long dark hair and wore a sweater despite the warm weather. Even from a distance, Nora could see the wariness in her posture, the hyper-vigilance of a child who had learned to expect danger. "That's Sophia," Chen confirmed. Nora approached carefully, Archer at her side. The girl noticed them immediately, her eyes widening at the sight of the police dog. "Hi there," Nora said gently. "I'm Officer Harlow and this is Archer. Is your name Sophia?" The girl nodded cautiously. "We're just checking in to make sure you're doing okay. This is Mr. Chen. He helps kids who might need some extra support." Sophia's eyes darted between them. "Am I in trouble?" "Not at all," Chen assured her. "We just want to talk for a few minutes." As they spoke, Nora observed the girl's body language, the way she flinched at sudden movements, how her sleeves slipped to reveal bruising on her wrist. Archer sat quietly beside her, and gradually Sophia began to relax in his presence. "Can I pet him?" she asked. "Of course. He's very friendly." As Sophia stroked Archer's fur, Chen gently asked about home, school, her mother's boyfriend. The girl's answers were guarded at first, then increasingly honest as Archer's calm presence soothed her fears. When a car screeched into the parking lot, Sophia tensed immediately. Archer's posture changed too, his focus sharpening on the vehicle. A woman emerged, her movements jerky with anger. "Sophia, get over here now!" Nora stepped forward, positioning herself between the girl and the approaching woman. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Harlow with Mapleton PD. We're conducting a welfare check." What followed was textbook intervention. The mother's initial hostility, the boyfriend's arrival and subsequent arrests, when his behavior escalated to threats, the emergency protection order obtained within hours, Sophia's temporary placement with a trained foster family connected to Second Chances. By evening, Nora sat with Sophia at the Foundation's Crisis Center as the girl settled in for her first night away from home. "Will Archer come visit me?" Sophia asked, clutching a stuffed dog that bore a striking resemblance to the Malinois. "Absolutely," as Nora promised. "He's very good at checking on his friends." Later, as she prepared to leave, Nora found Margaret in her office, reviewing Sophia's case file. "Thank you for responding so quickly," Margaret said. "The school counselor said Sophia's been showing warning signs for months. That's why we have the new protocol," Nora reminded her, "so children don't fall through the cracks anymore." Margaret nodded, her expression reflective. "Sometimes I think about how different things might have been if something like this had existed when I was trying to help Emma, Dion, and Tyler. Or for your son," Nora added quietly. "Yes." Margaret's eyes glistened. "But that's why we keep doing this work, isn't it? So the next child doesn't need someone to break the law to keep them safe." As Nora walked to her car with Archer, she thought about the path that had led them here. From a dog barking at a locked basement door, to a foundation that had already helped dozens of children find safety through legal channels. System wasn't perfect, it might never be, but it was better than it had been, and sometimes that had to be enough. Archer paused beside her, his attention caught by something in the distance. Nora followed his gaze to see Tyler, now 9 and thriving, walking hand in hand with Elena Ramirez. Beside them trotted a young German Shepherd mix, clearly adopted from the shelter as promised. Tyler spotted them and waved enthusiastically. "Officer Nora! Archer, come and meet Scout!" As they crossed the street to greet the boy and his dog, Nora felt the full circle of their journey. A child who had once been hidden away now stood in the sunlight, happy and whole. A teacher who had once kidnapped children now worked to reform the system that had failed them. And a K-9 officer who had once been suspended for following her conscience now led a specialized unit dedicated to child welfare cases. "He's beautiful," Nora said, kneeling to greet Scout, who approached Archer with puppy enthusiasm. "Archer helped me pick him," Tyler said proudly. "We're going to train him to be a therapy dog, like Archer, so he can help scared kids too." Elena smiled. "Tyler's very determined. He says he wants to be a K-9 officer when he grows up." "Is that so?" Nora asked. Tyler nodded solemnly. "Because dogs know when something's wrong, even when people don't believe it, and they don't give up." "That's true," Nora agreed, meeting Archer's steady gaze. "They certainly don't." As they parted ways, Nora's radio crackled with a new call. Another child, another home, another chance to get it right. "Ready, partner?" she asked Archer, who stood alert beside her. His answer was in his posture, ready as always to follow where duty led them. Together they headed toward their patrol car, guardians and echoes of each other's purpose, each making the other whole. The first time Tyler Bennett dreamed of the basement, he woke screaming. Elena Ramirez held him until the tremors subsided, wiping tears from his small face. "It's okay, mijo," she whispered. "You're safe now." But Tyler wasn't dreaming of Margaret Sinclair's basement classroom with its alphabet posters and scheduled mealtimes. He was dreaming of before, of dark closets and cigarette burns, of hunger and fear. "I want Mrs. Sinclair," he sobbed. "She kept the monsters away." Elena exchanged worried glances with her husband, Miguel. How do you explain to a traumatized 8-year-old that his rescuer was also his kidnapper? The next morning, Elena called Dr. Winters, Tyler's therapist. "He's conflating safety with his time in captivity," Dr. Winters explained. "It's not uncommon for children who've experienced severe abuse to form attachments to anyone who stops the pain, even if that person's actions were problematic." "Should we prevent him from seeing her?" Elena asked, watching Tyler through the window as he played with Scout in the backyard. "Actually, supervised contact might help him process what happened. Margaret Sinclair did something illegal, but she wasn't abusive. Tyler needs to understand the difference." 2 days later, Elena brought Tyler to Second Chances Foundation. Margaret was waiting in the visitation room, nervous but composed. "Tyler," she said softly as he entered, "it's good to see you." The boy hesitated only briefly before running to hug her. "I missed you. Did you know I have a dog now? His name is Scout, and he's learning commands just like Archer." As Tyler chattered excitedly, Margaret listened with genuine interest, asking questions about his new life. Elena watched carefully, noting the natural rapport between them. After Tyler left to show Scout to one of the counselors, Margaret turned to Elena. "Thank you for bringing him," she said. "I wasn't sure you would." "He needs this," Elena replied. "He needs to understand what happened." "And what did happen from your perspective?" Margaret asked quietly. Elena considered the question. "You did something wrong for the right reasons. You protected him when others wouldn't. But you also took him from his life without legal authority. Would you have done differently?" "I would have tried," Elena said honestly. "But I can't say for certain I wouldn't have reached the same breaking point you did." Their conversation was interrupted by Tyler's return. "Miss Horace Sinclair, can you come to my school sometime? For career day? I told my class you help kids who are in trouble." Margaret looked to Elena, who nodded slightly. "I'd be honored," Margaret said. "If your parents think it's okay." Later, as they drove home, Tyler was unusually quiet. "What are you thinking about?" Elena asked. "Ms. Sinclair did a bad thing taking us to her basement," he said slowly. "But she did it because nobody would help us when she asked." "That's right. So sometimes grown-ups have to break rules to help kids?" Elena chose her words carefully. "Breaking rules should be the very last choice, only when every other option has failed. That's why Ms. Sinclair started Second Chances, So there are better ways to help children without breaking the law. Tyler nodded, processing this. I'm glad Officer Nora and Archer found us. But I'm also glad Ms. Sinclair kept us safe until they did. The wisdom in his simple statement struck Elena deeply. Sometimes the world wasn't black and white, especially when viewed through a child's eyes. 6 years later, 14-year-old Tyler stood before his 9th grade class, Scout sitting proudly beside him for his presentation. This is Scout, my therapy dog in training, he began confidently. He works with me at Second Chances Foundation, helping kids who have experienced trauma feel safe during interviews and counseling sessions. As Tyler explained Scout's training and the foundation's work, his teacher, Ms. Patel, noticed the maturity in his voice, the passion in his explanation. Second Chances was created to help kids like me, Tyler continued. When I was 7, I was in a dangerous situation at home. My 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Sinclair, reported the abuse multiple times, but nobody helped. Eventually, she did something drastic. She took me and 2 other students to her home to protect us. A murmur ran through the classroom. What she did was against the law, Tyler acknowledged, but it also saved our lives. When we were finally found by Officer Harlow and her K-9 partner Archer, it led to changes in how our city handles child protection cases. After class, Ms. Patel approached him. That was a powerful presentation, Tyler. It must have been difficult to share your story. Not anymore, Tyler replied. It's important people know that sometimes the system fails kids, but it's also important they know it can get better. That afternoon, Tyler volunteered at Second Chances, where he now helped younger children learn to trust again. Scout worked alongside him, his gentle presence soothing frightened children during difficult interviews. Margaret, now in the 5th year of her probation, watched from her office as Tyler sat with a recently rescued 6-year-old, patiently showing her how to give Scout commands. He's remarkable, Nora Harlow said, joining Margaret at the window. Hard to believe he's the same scared boy we found in your basement. He had the strength all along, Margaret replied. He just needed the chance to find it. Nora nodded. We've come a long way since then. 23 successful interventions last month alone, all through proper channels. And the new legislation? Looking promising. The Sinclair-Bennett Child Protection Act should pass next session. Margaret smiled at the irony. Named after a kidnapper and her victim. The world works in strange ways. Not so strange, Nora countered. Named after 2 people who exposed fatal flaws in the system, one by breaking it, one by surviving it. As they watched Tyler work, Margaret reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The desperate choice she had made 6 years ago had cost her her freedom, her career, and nearly her future. But it had also created ripples that transformed how an entire city protected its most vulnerable citizens. Do you ever regret it? Nora asked suddenly. Taking the children? Margaret considered the question. I regret that I couldn't find another way. I regret the fear I caused their families, however neglectful some of them were. But do I regret protecting them from harm? She shook her head. Never. Tyler looked up then, catching their gaze. He smiled and waved before turning back to his young charge, who was giggling as Scout performed a trick. Neither does he, Nora observed. And in that moment, watching a former victim become a healer, Margaret understood that some actions, however wrong in execution, could still lead to right outcomes. It wasn't justification. The law existed for good reason, but it was perhaps redemption. The whispers in the dark had become voices in the light, speaking truths that needed to be heard, creating echoes that would protect generations of children to come. On a crisp autumn morning, 15 years after the events that changed Mapleton forever, Officer Archer Ramirez stood at attention beside his K-9 partner, a German Shepherd named Justice. At 23, Archer, formerly Tyler Bennett, had fulfilled his childhood dream of becoming a K-9 officer with the Mapleton Police Department's Special Victims Unit. The ceremony dedicating the new Nora Harlow Center for Child Protection was about to begin. The modern building attached to Second Chances Foundation would house specialized interview rooms, medical facilities, and counseling services. Everything needed to support children in crisis under one roof. Nervous about your speech? Asked Detective Elijah Mercer. Now gray at the temples, but still sharp-eyed. A little, Archer admitted. It's not every day you speak at an event honoring the officer who rescued you. Nora would be proud of you, Elijah said, his voice softening at the mention of his former colleague who had passed away the previous year after a brief battle with cancer. She always said you were destined for great things. Archer nodded, emotion tightening his throat. Nora had been his mentor, his inspiration, and eventually his training officer. Her death had left a hole in the department and in his heart that would never fully heal. As people gathered for the ceremony, Archer spotted Margaret Sinclair speaking with Diana Martinez near the entrance. At 73, Margaret had long completed her probation, but continued to serve as Director Emeritus of Second Chances. The foundation she had built as community service for her crimes now operated in 12 cities across the country. Their eyes met across the courtyard and Margaret smiled warmly. Their relationship had evolved over the years from kidnapper and victim to something more complex, mentor and protege perhaps, or two survivors of the same broken system. The ceremony began with speeches from the mayor, the police chief, and Diana Martinez, who now headed the Reformed Child Protective Services. When Archer's turn came, he stepped to the podium with justice at his side. 15 years ago, he began, I was a frightened 7-year-old trapped between two impossible situations. At home, I faced abuse that no child should ever endure. In Ms. Sinclair's basement, I found safety, but at the cost of freedom. He paused, looking out at the faces watching him. Some who had been part of his story from the beginning, others who knew it only as Mapleton's most famous case. Officer Nora Harlow and her K-9 partner Archer changed my life when they found me. Not just because they rescued me, but because they showed me what it means to truly protect someone. Nora taught me that sometimes protection requires courage to challenge systems that aren't working. Her K-9 partner taught me that sometimes you have to keep barking until someone listens. Laughter rippled through the audience. The center we dedicate today represents everything Nora stood for. Justice tempered with compassion, protection without control, and above all, the belief that every child deserves to be heard. After the ceremony, as guests toured the new facility, Archer found himself standing beside Margaret in the garden. Your speech was beautiful, she said. Nora would have been moved. I hope so. Archer glanced at the building bearing his mentor's name. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't taken us to your basement. I've wondered that too, Margaret admitted. For years I told myself I saved your life, but the truth is more complicated. What I did was wrong, however desperate the circumstances. But necessary, Archer added quietly. At least then, with the system as broken as it was. Perhaps. But the real heroes were Nora and her partner. They found you when no one else was looking. And you, Archer said, surprising her. You kept fighting for change even after you were caught. You could have served your probation and walked away, but you built something lasting instead. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know. As they walked back toward the center, Archer spotted Elena and Miguel Ramirez, the parents who had adopted him, given him their name, and supported his journey to healing. My parents are here, he said. Would you like to say hello? My mom brought her famous empanadas for the reception. I'd love that, Margaret replied. Watching them walk away, Elijah Mercer reflected on the strange journey that had brought them all to this moment. A teacher who kidnapped children out of desperation. A K-9 officer who refused to ignore her partner's warnings. A frightened boy who grew into a man determined to protect others. The system had failed, then broken, then been rebuilt stronger than before. And somehow, impossibly, they had all found redemption in the process. As the autumn leaves fell around the Nora Harlow Center, Elijah thought about cycles breaking and new beginnings, about justice and mercy, about guardians and echoes, and about a dog who wouldn't stop barking at a locked basement door until someone finally listened.